Good morning, this is McGarren. I am going to demonstrate how to do poster studies with various references. All the references that I got were from unsplash.com. They are copyright-free images. I'd recommend using those or your own references to be able to digitally paint from. So let's get into it. Open up a new document like I have here on the screen. I'm going to make it 10 inches wide, 8 inches high at a resolution of 300 dpi. If your computer has a hard time with 300 dpi, then you can just change this down to 72. It doesn't make too much of a difference because we're not doing too much detail. 72 dpi, or dots per inch, or ppi, pixels per inch. 72 is made for the internet. 300 is made for printing or professional stuff. So usually I like to keep it at 300, but because these are so small and simple, I'm just going to change it to 72. Other thing, make sure your color mode is set to grayscale. These are just value poster studies, not color poster studies. If we were doing color poster studies, we'd want to do RGB. That's located right here. So we're selected on grayscale, background white. That's totally fine. We're going to create this. Ta-da! Look at that. I'm going to increase the size down the bottom left-hand corner here to 200 and hit enter. So now we're at around the right size. My paintbrush, I'm going to select a hard paintbrush. Make sure that you can see your color wheel or square, whatever color you have, and also your layers. And if you don't see those, you go to Window and you go to Workspace and click on Painting, and it should bring it up. And if it doesn't bring it up when you click on Painting, down here under Window, you have Brushes, Color, and Layers that you can bring up. So simple and easy. All right, once we have that space set up, I am going to make sure that I'm on Hard Brush. I'm going to click and make a new layer. Let's call it Poster 1. And I'm going to make crosshairs in this. And I know that it's 10 inches wide, so halfway between 10 is 5. And then also it is 8 inches high, halfway between 8 is 4. So I'm going to make my little paintbrush here a little bit smaller by using the bracket keys. To make it smaller, your brush, you use the left bracket key, it'll make it smaller, and then the right bracket key will make it bigger. Now all I have to do is make this relatively small. I am selected on layer 1. I line up my brush with here. If you don't see rulers onto the left or at the top, then all you have to go to is View, Rulers, and it'll show it up. So I line up with 5 because it's 10 inches wide. I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to click with my mouse, left click, and press Shift and draw down. Bam. And then I line my paintbrush up with 4 inches. I click with the left of the mouse, press Shift, and draw horizontally. Bam. Look at that. I have those put in there. There's another thing that you can do, and that's by pulling down guides. And all you have to do that is you line up your mouse at the top here. See how it has that pointer arrow? And you left click and drag down, and it will put a guide in the middle. And if you go to the left-hand side with the arrow, click and drag it across, and it'll give you a guide. So now you have guides separating things. See how nice that looks? Man. All right, so here we're at Poster Study 1. And I need to bring up a reference for Poster Study 1. So I'm going to click Spacebar, pull my page off to the side a little bit more. I'm going to go to File and Open, and in my downloads here, I have 4 of these. I'm going to go with something pretty simple. This one here, and I'm going to open it, and I'm going to grab this and pull it down so that it's off of that page. And here I can use it as my reference onto the left-hand side. And I have to make sure that I click back into the window here for what I'm going to be painting in, and this is what I'm going to be painting on. I'm going to increase the size of this. Let's go for 300. 300, enter, and it made it a little bit bigger. I'm going to press spacebar, drag it down a little bit so I can kind of see what's going on. Now, to start off with this, I'm just going to make a selection here. So go off to the left-hand corner, go to rectangular marquee, and I'm going to select this area. It will lock to it, or snap to, that's the correct word. Snap to. It'll snap to those lines so that I can start painting in here, and that is my space. Now, when I paint in here, it'll only stay in here. It won't go outside of the area. And I'm on poster study 1, which will be the top left-hand corner. I make sure that I go to my paintbrush, click on hard brush, and I'm going to make the size of my brush a little bit bigger. Once I have my paintbrush made a little bit bigger, I'm going to go to this. I'm going to help myself out a little bit by making this black and white. So I'm going to go to Image, Mode, Grayscale. Yes, I want to discard that information. All right, it's grayscale because colors can really throw off what you're looking at. And if you change it to grayscale, you'll be able to see the actual value differences when painting it. So here you can see the top half is lighter value, bottom half is a darker value. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. I've clicked onto the poster study that I'm going to be painting and look at that lighter value. I'm going to go up here to a lighter value, and I'm going to do the biggest background shapes first. So I'm just going to go across here. It might need to go just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to go a little bit lighter across the top there. There we go. Let's see how that looks. And then I'm going to go with a middle gray. Click here, middle gray, and I'm going to go across there. Yeah, that looks pretty close. And then I'm going to go to a much darker value here. So see how quick this is? I mean, I'm just simplifying it into 3 simple values. Needs to go just a titch darker. Yes, that looks pretty darn good right there. All right. Then we have these other values that are sitting off here. So I've done the big 3 values, this darker value, mid value, and lighter value. And this is a poster study, so I need to make sure that all my edges are staying hard. I'm not trying to soften or make things transition nicely or softly in anything. I'm just trying to stay focused on the correct value. All right, so if we go back up into the sky area, I'm going to press Alt, Color Pick. I'm going to go just a little bit lighter, and I'm going to make my paintbrush just a little bit smaller with the bracket key. Ta-da. And if I want to make it perfectly horizontal across, I can do Click, Shift, and click again, and it will stroke it across. Let's make it just a little bit lighter and a little bit smaller. So I'll press my pen down, press the Shift button, and draw straight across. Now I've just made a nice horizontal line. And I can do the same thing up here. I'm going to make my paintbrush a little bit smaller using the bracket keys. Press Alt, select that, and I'm going to make this nice and straight and horizontal. So I'm going to do Click, Shift, and draw it across, click. All right, now I'm going to go back to these dark areas, Alt, select it. I'm just going to try to find some interesting shapes that are close to what I'm looking at here. This value is a little bit lighter than what's going on in this darker value, so I've already selected it. I'm just going to go a little bit lighter, and I'm going to come down off to the side here. And because I'm just making these simple shapes, I'm not so worried about the exact proportion just yet. Oh, it comes down much lower. This needs to come up much higher. So here's this darker or lighter value that I'm working with here. And I'm going to go back into these darker values, press Alt, and come up to the top there. All right, so there we have a couple. This needs to go a little bit darker. When I'm looking at and comparing these 2 values, this much is much darker. This is darker on this side. So I'm going to go with this color. Actually, I'm going to go with this middle value and go just slightly darker and come across here. I'm going to undo by Control Z. That was a bad mark. Going to make my paintbrush just a little bit smaller. Notice I'm doing really big paintbrushes and I'm making it smaller and smaller as I'm getting into the details. So here I'm going to click Shift, go across, Shift click, come down to the edge there. So that's getting close there. Here I come off to the edge here. It doesn't matter if I'm breaking that shape too much. No, it doesn't. But I do want to make this just slightly darker. Slightly darker. So now I'm having a transition that's coming in from a lighter value in the center as it's going darker out onto the edge. Now these lighter values, there are some mid grays that are sitting there that I want to bring in to the shape. So I'm going to select this, go slightly darker, and come across the edge there, click there, shift click, ta-da. Okay, and then there's a little bit more there and a little bit more there. I'm gonna make my paintbrush value just a little bit darker, make my paintbrush a little bit smaller, and put in that nice little line that's coming across there and there too. All right, so this is coming along. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller, bring that value across because there's this nice little line that's coming across there. Now there's this little dark value that's sitting in the middle there. It looks to be close to this same value. So I'm gonna click Alt, select that value, go a little bit smaller with the bracket keys. And make it just a little bit darker right on the edge here. Okay, now this is not totally and completely accurate, but it is close. It is a good understanding of going from simple big shapes to smaller and smaller shapes to refine forms. So that is the first one. I'm going to move on to the second one now. So I'll go to my selection and just drag it, and I'll go to the right, snap to. It will be on the second one. I'm going to make a new layer right there. I'm going to close that off. No, I don't want to save it. And I'm going to open up a new one. I'll open, I already found these ones, so we're going to go with these double pairs. And I'm going to pull it off there. And then I'm going to go to Image, Mode, Grayscale. Yes, I want to discard it because I want to see what the values are. Bring it right here. Ta-da! So my selection is on the one that's off to the right, and now I'm going to do a poster study of this. So remember, big shapes. That's what we're going for. I'm going to title this Poster 2. So poster studies, big, flat, simple, hard-edged shapes. That's all you have to remember. So pick a paintbrush that is hard-edged. You can press B or the paintbrush tool over there. Make sure that it's hard-edged over here. And then we're going to start to work in here. I need to select a layer, though, to work in. So there's my layer. Now my paintbrush is there. I'm going to go big or go home using the right bracket, make it bigger. And I'm going to look at where these major shapes are. Now look at how big this is. So that is almost completely black. I do not want you to use color picker and pick the values that are in your reference. I want you to eyeball it, because when you eyeball it, you'll be able to see things more accurately. So here I'm in this section. I'm going to do click, shift, drag it across. Sure, why not? Go all the way over. And then here is a lighter value. We're almost completely white here, and I'll do click, shift, coming across there. Sure, why not go all the way over? And then these values are going to be slightly different. So I'm going to go from this darker value, press Alt, go a little bit lighter, and oh, that angle is way off, but that's okay. I'm going to come back over to, looks like it's about almost the middle of it. So I'm going to come over just a little bit further over, angle that down. Okay, and I'm going to go back to this part, make my paintbrush just a little bit smaller. And something along those lines. Now that corner is going to be behind the pear, so it's totally fine. I could make this a little bit more defined by not going as light between the two and just kind of break up that shape a little bit more. There we go. That looks okay. All right. Then there's this lightest value that's sitting here at the bottom. So I will Alt, select there, go lighter, and go across the bottom there. Ta-da. Simple line. So this is just to see these big, simple shapes. Now, these values of the pairs, they're like middle value-ish. And I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller. So I'll use the bracket key and just to start to paint it in. Now, you can do this all on one layer, or you could make multiple layers to work on it because I'm working on different shapes, pretty complex shapes. And if I want to keep a hard edge, I can use a selection tool to make those shapes. So, but I would prefer to keep it all in one layer so that I can learn to deal with various colors and shapes. And it's not that hard to correct things as you go along anyways. Once I have figured out what value that pair is going to be, I'm going to place the first pair here. And it comes down like that. That's one of the rounded spheres. And then the other pair, that's one of the rounded spheres, and then it gets smaller. So bracket, left bracket, and it comes down like that, up, and this one comes up and out like that. So here we have two pairs. Now I'm going to divide the light shapes from the shadow shapes. And the shadow shapes are off to the side here and around this side of the pair also. And if you look at the shadow shape, it's almost the same value as that background value. So I'm going to just color pick it, make my brush a little bit smaller, and paint in that shape and make it just a little bit smaller. And then it gets reflected light in here, which this value is just a little bit darker than this gray value. So I'm going to go back to here, go slightly darker. Keeping these shapes simple. This value is just a little bit darker too than where I was at before. So here I'm going to start to create that other part of the pair by painting in this little shape. Okay, and I think I want to go darker over on this side too. Okay, and then we go a little bit lighter and create this form. See, hard-edged, simple shapes. I'm not trying to make it too complex here. I'm just trying to figure out where these values are sitting. Okay, and now we have this value seems to be just a little bit too dark, but it's almost the same value as back there, so maybe it is right. Okay, I'm going to take this value and put it underneath the pair. So go to Alt, this back part, line up with the back there, kind of goes off the page. That looks to be just a little bit too dark in value, and that's all right. I can change it. Okay, it does go dark right underneath the pair, and then a little bit lighter there. So I'm going to take, I'll just go a little bit lighter. Paint over it. There we go. And again, all of these shapes, it doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as I'm getting the general idea and comparing my values. And that comes up, then down. This comes across like that. And, oh no, this shape is totally wrong. How am I going to fix it? Well, it's real easy. Press Alt, select that color. bring it up. That was too much. That's a little bit better. Okay, and then the same thing with the front here. Because it's a cast shadow underneath that pear. Badang. Okay, and then I have lighter values in here, so I'm going to make my paintbrush just a little bit bigger and select this value, go a little bit lighter. And go just a little bit lighter and smaller brush, bracket key. No, it needs to go even lighter than that. It's about the right size though. And then we have these little highlighted stems that come up there. Now stems are a little bit darker in value. So if I go with this shadow value, that's about a little bit big, but bracket, bracket, left bracket. And then we do the same thing down here. And then I'm going to take this background value. It kind of disappears. I mean, there is some detailed information in there, but for the most part, it disappears. And make it a little bit smaller. Now, with poster studies, you can make them as big or as small as you want in terms of detail of the shapes. The most important part to remember about a poster study is it's a study. So you just want to get some information in there. Make sure that you are getting enough information in there. This line here on the front of this tablecloth needs to go just a little bit lighter. Also, I'm noticing that some of these values in the pear need to go just a little bit lighter, but that's what a poster study is for. You look at it, you determine what needs to happen. And I don't have to make those changes right now. I'm going to do click, shift click, get that lighter value. And then I'm going to do Alt and come in and change that angle just a little bit more. Okay, so that's poster study number 2. See how easy this is? I mean, it's really not that hard. I've done 2 poster studies in like 10 minutes each for each poster study. Okay, so I'm going to move to the third one. We're going to get a little bit more complex with this stuff. No, I'm going to go to the selection up here on the left. I'm going to grab this and drag it over to spacebar. Come across there. I'm going to make a new layer, call it poster 3. All right, so now I'm prepped and ready to go for my third poster study. File, open. Let's go with these nice little elliptical shapes. Put it in here. And now this is going to be a little different because I don't have a vertical plane. I could rotate things, which, you know what? Maybe I'll do that. It still won't fit right. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this so that it will fit my composition correctly, and I'm going to go with that. Now, I've made this composition closer to what I'm looking at here. I think I need to make it just a little bit to value scale, make it easy for myself. Go to grayscale. Yes, discard those changes. All right, so now I can see these values. I'm going to evaluate and go, okay, this is my darkest value, and down in here, those 2 values are really dark, and then this is my lightest value. There's a little bit of a highlight that's over there, but for the most part, this mass is a little bit lighter than all the other masses. So go back over here, spacebar. I'll bring it up just a little bit so that I can see this. And go to my paintbrush, hit B for brush. It's hard edged. Oh, I need to go to poster layer 3. Now that the brush is big, gonna look at that value. It is pretty close to the value that I already had. So I'm just gonna come here, place it down there. That's a little bit too much of an angle. And then I'm gonna go with, it looks to be like this value. So I can color pick from this value. I'm gonna go with this value and make a change here. And I may need to make this angle a little bit steeper. There we go. Now I'm making my paintbrush smaller so that I can get that angle a little bit better. Remember, poster steady, keep it simple. Don't want to get too much detail in there. And now I'm gonna go with the ellipse, this plate. And it seems to be just a little bit darker than this value. So click Alt, make it a little bit smaller. And compositionally, it comes to right about here, comes out and starts to drop. There's my angle. It breaks this shape. Comes in and down. I'm trying to keep these shapes as abstract as possible because I don't want to start to paint like this cup or a bowl. And reason for that is because if I look at the cup and the bowl and I go, oh, I need to paint that, then more than likely I'll get it wrong. So here I'm gonna go with this shadow value again, and I'm lining up this part. This part of the ellipse is just a little bit higher than that part. So if I go with here, there, line it up just a little bit higher, and it comes down to and I'm going to make my brush just a little bit smaller. Another alternative to doing this is by using the selection tool and getting all of the shapes that you want by using the selection tool and filling it in with a paint bucket. Make my paintbrush just a little bit bigger. I need to get the light value of this. I'm going to go again with this part, go just slightly darker in value. And it's right about here on that light shape. And this needs to be shifted back just a little bit more. So I'm going to do Alt, take that. I just said take that. And then this part needs to be filled in a little bit more. So I'm going to do Alt, fill in that shape a little bit more, go back up here, Alt, simple, big shapes. Okay, and then up in the top here, I clicked on it, whoops. I have this slightly lighter value and then a lighter value that's in there. And I'm gonna put those in there, the bigger shapes right now. So if I select this shadow value and then go slightly lighter in value, I can come, it's just off to the side here. Okay, it does get a little bit lighter in this middle part, so I'm going to go just slightly lighter. And then it has that little highlight that's off to the edge there. So still keeping it kind of in those shadow values, bracket, left bracket to make it a little bit smaller. I don't know why it's not showing up on the screen, but that value seems to be pretty darn close to what's going on. Okay, now I'm going to take this same value and I'm going to put it here in this reflected light. And it looks to be just a little bit too light in value. So I'm going to darken it just a little bit more. Paintbrush just a little bit bigger. There we go. And then we have the ellipse. This ellipse in here is just a little bit lighter than the ellipse that's out here. So it's close to that same value that's going on there. So I'm just gonna make my paintbrush just a little bit smaller using the left bracket. Click off to that edge there. Come around here and simplify that ellipse. Now I could use the selection tool to be able to make this ellipse, but I don't want to. I just want to freehand this. For me, it takes less time to freehand things. So here I'm going to make this just a little bit darker and come off to the edge here. And then select this guy. So now all it is trying to make these value changes more subtle as they're going around the form. And I need to pick a value between those two. And a value between those two even more, so I'll lighten up my value just a little bit more. And lighten it a little bit more, make my brush a little bit smaller. Needs to go even lighter. No, even lighter, for the love of Pete. Get the right value. And now just a little bit darker. So do you see how I'm keeping these all hard-edged and transitioned in there? This value needs to go just slightly lighter. So I'll select that, go lighter in value, and there we go. There's a little transition. And now I have this ellipse that I need to do, and I'm going to freehand it. You can do whatever you want. If you want to make a selection tool and do it, then great. But I'm just going to come in here, select this mid value right there. Going to make my brush just a little bit smaller, left bracket. I'm holding my breath right now. I'm just kidding, I'm not holding my breath, but maybe I should. There's another thing that you can do in Photoshop that is really, really nice, and that is turn on smoothing. So you see how it's like shaky and wiggly all the way around? So I'm gonna undo what I just did. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So if you go into the top up here where it says smoothing, and you click on that, and you go up to like 100%, watch what happens. I'm going to go at the same rate, but my hand is still jiggly. What? But look at how smooth it creates it. Now, it's not that good of an ellipse, so I can just do Control Z and redo my ellipse. Make sure that it's getting at its peak right here, and then it starts to come down the edge, peak at the center of the bottom, and then come back over here. Now, that's a little bit better, but I'm just going to clean up some things. So I'm going to turn down smoothing because I like the freehand approach, and I'm just going to use this background value to kind of get that ellipse a little bit better, make it a little bit thinner. Same thing with this value on the inside here. I'm going to Alt select. Make that opening just a little bit wider. This is so ugly, but it's okay. It's a poster study. Doesn't need to be beautiful. All right, and then I'm going to get that highlight change that's going on here in the edge. Go Alt, select that value, go lighter, go just a little bit smaller. There's the highlight, and go over on this side. Go a little bit lighter again, and a little bit smaller, left bracket. And a little bit lighter, highlight, highlight. And now I just have one value transition that I need to do over here. I'm gonna make my brush big again using the right bracket. I'm gonna select this slightly darker value that's right there. I'm thinking it's close to that value, and I'm going to paint, no, that's too dark. So I'll go with this one. There we go. Now this shape is wrong, so I'm gonna come in here and select this part and kind of taper it down just a little bit more. Then make my paintbrush a little bit smaller, and I have this angle that I want to change. Okay, so all I need to do is just look at what are these shape changes and forms, how am I going to make them better, and what am I exactly looking for. So I'm just trying to compare. It's hard to do this and talk at the same time. I'm just trying to compare. Oh, that didn't connect very well. Compare these values and transitions to these values and transitions. And I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. So I'm going to move on to the next one, which is a portrait. All I'm doing is painting relatively quickly and slowly trimming in these shapes on the outside to make that look a little bit better. All right, I hope that was helpful or beneficial. Oh, I need to fill in this white area that's right down here. That's no bueno. And I need to fill in this back area right back here too. A little messy, but it's okay, it fills it in. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the next one. So I'm going to take my selection again, go to the marquee, grab it, slide it over here, snap to. I'm going to use my keyboard, shift it over a little bit more. I'm gonna close this guy out. Yep, I do not want you. Go to File, Open, and we'll go with this. And we'll go with this portrait. And take it, pull it across. There we go. Same thing. I'm in a horizontal format here. I could do a vertical and just rotate my page, but I'm gonna just shrink this because there's a lot of info and stuff in there that I don't care to see. So there we go. Look at that. Okay, now go to Image, Mode, Grayscale. All right. Go to this selection. I need to make a new poster or a new layer. Title it Poster 4. All right, so now I'm selected on Poster 4. I'm gonna go with my brush, hitting B or selecting over here. I'm gonna make it big. Right bracket makes it bigger. And I'm gonna go with a general gray value in the background. The gray value looks to be about right here. Now a little bit lighter. So I've filled in the value now. Flesh is just a little bit darker, so I'm gonna make my brush a little bit smaller, go slightly darker in value, and paint in this big general shape. A little bit smaller. Okay, maybe your head's just a little bit too big, but that's okay. Now I'll make my paintbrush just a little bit smaller, left bracket a couple of times, go much darker in value. I have that mass of hair to put in here, a little bit smaller. And remember, there's a poster study. No, it needs to go darker. Put it down. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And this is where I can get the contour of the face, because this darker value comes all the way down there. Kind of comes out like that. Not quite all the way to the top of the page. There we go. You can see the peak here is just to the right of her neck. So neck, peak just needs to be a little bit over more. I can fix that a little bit later. All right, and then hair comes off to the side like that, down, and this level is a little bit higher than this level. And I'm going to come in to this background value and paint it down just a little bit more here. Okay, and then select this color, come across there. It's coming along, I guess. The ear, just a little bit smaller brush. And the neck needs to come down and out a little bit more. Okay, now this is the really important part. All I'm going to do now is divide the light shape from the shadow shape, because here I have local, this is what we'd call like the local value. Flesh tone value, hair value, background value. Now I have to create a light shape versus the shadow shape. Just going to clean up this. Angle a little bit more. All right, so if I do this value and I look down here, it's really light in value. Same thing with on her flesh tone. So I'm going to go much lighter, not completely white, but pretty darn close, and create this lighter value off to the bottom edge. Same thing with the little blip that's sitting up here. Now, that little blip of light might not be needed. And if I want to soften out these edges, all I have to do is go a little bit darker and make my brush a little bit smaller and just make these shapes a little bit smaller. So you can see that it's kind of softening out that transition. Go a little bit darker again and make those shapes just a little bit smaller, softer edge. So now I'm starting to create a gradient within these hard edge brush strokes. All right, back to the light. Get this value, and it comes across there. I'm not taking a lot of time to try to get these shapes exactly right. I'm just trying to define something. Give me something. And this gets a little bit darker in value as it goes away into that cheekbone. Okay, now I have my light shapes separated from my shadow shapes. And I can start to put in subtle changes within those lights and subtle changes within those darks. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select this. I'm going to refine my shapes just a little bit more. I need to bring that up just a titch more. There's a slightly darker value here in her eye socket that comes up. And then on her nose, this transition is a little bit softer. So I'm going to select that, go a little bit darker in value. Left bracket, make it a little bit smaller. And maybe I need to bring this up a little bit higher. Darker value. Just like I need to make this darker in value. And this edge is pretty soft here, so darker in value. And darker in value. And then Alt. Select that value to make it darker. So I have this cast shadow, which is relatively hard-edged, from her nose onto her cheek, going down towards her mouth. And then I also have this softer edge that is coming off from the nose. And it kind of scoops up. And then we have a softer transition here on the forehead. So I'm going to go with this value, make it a little bit lighter. A little bit more lighter. See how easy this is? May just do a little bit at a time. And then there's that same value that's kind of sitting off to the side here. Because now I'm starting to turn the form in those lights. And it does go a little bit darker in that edge right there. And then I'm going to select the hair value. Okay, so there is a subtle transition that's occurring here. I need to make that white of the sclera whiter. So I'm going to go with this. And I'm going to go with this shadow value. And then there's this angle that's being cast down like that. Now, I'm not going to paint in eyelashes or anything like that. I'm just refining some things. So I'm going back and forth, refining shapes. This comes down lower to the eye, over for the ear. And then there are darker values that are in the shadows. So I'm going to go in this value and paint in a slightly darker value along the edge of the nose. There's also another value that's a little bit darker underneath the nose. The lips are going to be slightly darker in value and simple. This eye is going to be slightly darker in value also, along with this one. Look at that. Man, so simple. The ear, or the jawline underneath the ear. And I need to bring up this. Her ear is too big, so I'm taking this darker value, bringing that shape over. And this darker value in the ear, I'm just putting in darker things. I'm not going for the helix or the anti-helix or anything like that. Just simple forms. Okay, and then we have a slightly darker value at the hairline up here. And then on the hair, I'm just going to simply place in some values to give it a sense that light is coming onto the hair. And when I squint down, those are really the only two values that I'm seeing that is making a difference on. I'm just going to darken some of those values down because they're just a little bit too dark. And then there are lighter values that are in here. So I could take these values and start to paint them in the hair to kind of break up that space a little bit more. Or I can just make the paintbrush a little bit smaller, put it in. But then this starts to get into drawing, and it's a poster study. It's not meant to be a drawing. All right, so big major shapes, that's what we're looking for. I feel like most of the shapes and general values have been accomplished in this poster study. I could refine some shapes a little bit more, like here under the nose. Make that shadow shape a little bit smaller. There we go. And these lips, just a little bit smaller. And then this value under the chin needs to go just actually slightly lighter. There we go. Paintbrush a little bit bigger and put in this nice little, darker value. So I'm brushing from the left side down so that I don't pull the canvas everywhere. And to refine these things, you can just go more and more detailed in all of these values. I don't want to do that. I want to just try to keep it as simple as I possibly can, which, I mean, right now it feels fine with the shapes. I'm getting the big general values correct. The light source, some of the edges, softening out transitions on the edges versus harder edges, and all it is just manipulation of shapes now. So I think I want to make her chin just a little bit longer. There we go. Now she looks like she has a normal chin. So nice. All right. I hope that makes sense. And also I hope it's beneficial with demonstrating how I would approach doing these poster studies. Spacebar, Control minus, that will zoom out. So now I can look at these simple poster studies and say, oh, yeah, they read well. I could go darker in some of these values in the hair, but that's totally fine. The shapes look really, really good. So this is good practice to have under your belt to do paintings quickly. Key is, just as a summary, large, hard-edged brushes first, and then you break your shapes down smaller and smaller and smaller. So start with the big shapes, the background, and the big values, separating background, middle ground, foreground with the 3 different values that you see there. It might help to squint down to see those values correctly. The other thing that is important is keeping them hard edge. So don't use a soft edge brush, just use a hard edge brush. And if you want to make softer transitions, you just change the value and use a hard edge, kind of like what you see here in this cup. It looks like a softer transition because I used smaller brushes and more subtle transitions of values for each change. Okay, again, hope that was beneficial, and good luck with your assignment if you made it through this entire video. Okay, have a stellar day.